back to the F8N shop. I know it's been a while since I posted anything. I've been real busy here in the shop, but I just wanted to show you one of my newest projects, and that's this compressor over here. This is an industrial speed air compressor. I don't have a year on it. I'll try and find that out. It is a pretty old unit, but it's pretty interesting how I came across this. I had a Husky compressor, 80 gallons, that was 220, and I was looking on Craigslist, and I just happened to see this ad that said that they were selling this compressor because they didn't have three-phase power. They were looking for a 220 unit. So I just called the guy up, asked him if he was interested in trading, and he said yeah. So he brought it over on a trailer, and I temp wired it into a cutoff box, and just straight into the motor, 3 phases into the directly into the motor, and turned it on, and it worked. It's actually quieter than the compressor that I had. It generates pressure a lot quicker, and it holds pressure a lot more steady. So it was a good deal for me. So he was happy. He got a single phase compressor. I got a 3-phase industrial compressor, and it was a good deal. So I've got it sitting over here. I got everything temped in, and I thought I'd just take a minute to walk you through all the wiring and how I got all this stuff temped in. It's really sloppy, I know that. It's not safe, and it's not going to stay that way. I just needed to make sure that I understood all the wiring and made sure I had everything wired up correctly, so that I could start to permanently get this thing wired up. I am going to be making some modifications to it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But because the motor on this is so big, it's 3-phase for one, and then for two, that the motor on this is a 10 horsepower motor. So you can't just turn that kind of stuff off and on with a toggle switch. So I had to do a lot of research. I had to talk to several different people, and I was able to get everything figured out and get this thing wired up, and it's working really well. So let me show you what I got over here, and then we'll talk about future projects. So here she is. This thing looks pretty sweet. I was debating on stripping it down and painting it and refurbishing it. I put a couple pictures online, and I got several comments that I should just keep it the same, that the patina look looks pretty sweet, and maybe just throw a clear coat on it. And I think I like that idea. This thing, you can tell, has had a lot of life, and it's just got a really nice looking patina to this green, the original green paint that was on it. And it just looks really industrial, so it's just got a really cool look to it. So I think overall I am going to keep everything pretty much the way it is. Just clean it up, change out all the oil, do a little tune-up on it, change out this filter. This filter's busted. It looks like it's bent pretty bad, so I'm going to have to get a new filter on it. It did have a belt guard, but it was pretty worn out too, so I took the belt guard off, and oiled everything back here and sprayed some WD-40, made sure that the belts are all okay. Everything looks good on it, so I will be making a new belt guard for it. And then you can see here the motor, everything's just temped in. I got the 3 lines coming in for the 3 phases to the motor, and I don't know if you can see it, but it is a 10 horsepower motor, 220/440 volts, 1740 RPM. So this is a big girl. Over here is the pressure switch, and you can see I've got those wires temped in as well. Back here is the spring adjustment for the pressure switch, and it was adjusted really low, and I got it up to about 160 psi now. So this will cut off at about 160 psi. Here's the PSI gauge, and it's actually rated pretty low. It goes up to 160, but this tank is rated to cut out at 175. It does have a pressure relief valve over here, and that pressure relief valve will cut out at 175 psi. So I will be either changing this this gauge out, or I will be adding another one, probably around the 200 psi range, so that I could get an accurate measurement. Okay, so for anybody that's new out there to compressors and how they work, I'll walk you through just a very high level of how these things generate and compress air, and just the overall theme of how a compressor works. So you start with your motor. Your motor is what kicks on the actual compressor, and you can see it's tied in right here from these belts. And you go over here to the compressor section, and back here is what's actually spinning the compressor. And you can see you've got two cylinders here. You've got one on this side and then one on this side. Now the compressed air is actually coming out of this port right here. This is where your air is coming out, and it is going down and into the tank right here. So it goes into the tank, and then once this tank, if it goes above 175, that's what why you have this pressure relief valve. That'll kick off and relieve the pressure back under 175 psi. Then you will also notice this pressure relief valve here. So what this one does is it will relieve the built-up pressure that is inside of these heads here. So whenever the compressor shuts off, there is still built-up pressure inside this line, and so when the motor tries to kick back on, it is trying to fight the pressure that's already built up in this line. And so to save the life of your motor, there is a relief valve here that clears out the pressure buildup inside of these cylinders, and it allows this wheel to turn freely. So you can see that this wheel turns pretty freely. But if you have built-up pressure in these lines, it's a lot harder for the motor to kick this on. Okay, now you have your tank here, and you've got several different ports. You've got one on this side, you've got two on the front here, and you've got one on this side, which is where I'm tied in right now. And I just got a quick filter on it. This is a lubricator, but there's nothing in it, so I'm just using the filter for the pressure regulator here. And underneath you have your water drain, so you can open this up. If I can get it. And you want to do this before you start the day, or you start work, or before you charge up your compressor. You always want to drain the water out of it first, because you don't want that getting in your lines. Now they do make automatic drains for these, and that's probably something that I will be installing on this. You can just set it at certain times of the day, or certain days of the week, I guess, to automatically drain the water out for you. So that is something that I will be installing on this. Close that back up. And as I said before, this is your pressure switch that you can adjust to cut the compressor off and on at whatever PSI that you determine. So right now I got it about as high as I can get it because I want as much pressure as I can get to be built up in the tank. So that's a very high level explanation of how a compressor works. Not a whole lot to it, pretty simple. They've been around for a long time and not much has really changed with compressed air.